let's say you've got a spreadsheet with some information in it like I have in front of you here, which is we have two columns. We have email and name. In the email column, we've got emails, but in the name column, we've got first name and last name. And we want to get this information into another source. And for this demo, I've set up something in Airtable, which looks like this. So we've got email and we've got first name and last name. First name, last name are broken into two. So how do we go from here to there using Zapier? Okay, computer, let's automate this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into Zapier and we're going to create a new Zap. I'm going to call this G-Sheet to Airtable. We're going to create a webhook to kick this off. Okay, so what I want to do now is start building this. So the first thing we want to do after we've defined our webhook, which is what we'll use later on to execute this as app, the first thing we want to do is get many spreadsheet rows from the spreadsheet. So I'm going to choose Google Sheets, and there's a option here called Get Many Spreadsheet Rows. And since we have 10 spreadsheet rows, this is what is going to be useful for us. Let me just find the file we want to work with. Import here, sheet 0. Okay, so we have a few different things we could choose here. Now, one of the things it says is row count, and that's required, and I think it defaults to 10. So let's look at our spreadsheet over here. And we have 11 rows, but the first row are the headers. So we do basically have 10 rows that we want to grab. And if you look here in the next field, it says first row is 2, which is the because the first row is the header. So that looks fine to me. I'm going to click continue, and I'm going to choose test, and we can take a look at the rows that it grabbed. So 1, 2, 3, all the way down to 10. 10th row is Hannah Robinson. Let's just make sure, Hannah Robinson. Okay, so we're good to go. That grabbed all the rows. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a loop to go through those rows. Looping by Zapier. And we have a few different options here. The one we want are line items. And this is where we want to define the values to loop. So if we look back at our spreadsheet, we have two things we want to loop through, email and name. So how we set that up is we type whatever word we want, email makes sense here, and then we go here and we find the email row. So right here we can see email, 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 all separated by commas. So that's the one we want. And then we want to click plus to add another item. We'll call this name, and we want to look down here, and this is the name row. Okay, so we've defined those two. We can leave these other settings at their default. I'm going to click continue and test this step, and there we go. We can see that the loop is working because we have preview loop values 1, we have the email, the name, 2, we have email, the name, and on and on and on. So this is looking good so far. So now that we have our loop established, we want to tackle formatting. And that means basically we want to break out the names into first names and last names. So let me show you how we're going to do that. Let's add a step. We're going to use the formatter by Zapier step. And what we want to do here is we have different things we can work with the formatter by Zapier function, which is pretty handy. In our case, we're working with text, so we're going to choose text. And there's a bunch of different things you can do to transform that text. The thing we're interested in is the split function. And it's asked, well, what do you want to split for the input? So for the input, we want to split the name, Lorraine Murray, and that would be the different name based on every loop that it goes through. So it's just showing the first result right here. So we choose Lorraine Murray. And it says, okay, well, what do you want to separate it on? In our case, Lorraine Murray and every other name is separated by a space. And you can see here it even says character or word separator To split the text on, default is space, so we don't actually have to do anything. We'd have to, if we had something else like a comma or something, then we would type that. But in our case, we're doing a space. That's the default, so we don't have to actually enter anything. And the segment index, now it's asking, well, once we split this on the space, what do you want the result to be? The first word or the second word? And in our case, let's choose second. We want to grab Murray, which is the last name. And what I like to do at this point is always rename my Zap. So get last name. That way I remember what this function is doing. So let's click continue and test and see if we are successful. There we go, Murray. So it grabbed the last name. So now what we want to do is the same thing for the first name. So let's do a formatter, text, transform. We're going to do split. Input, we want to go to the loop and we want to grab the name. Separator is space, and this time we want the first word, Lorraine. Again, I'm going to rename this to get first name. Let's continue and test, and we have Lorraine, so that's good. Okay, so now that we've got the name broken out into first name and last name, we're ready to go ahead and pull this into Airtable. So I'm going to add a step, and I'm going to choose Airtable. And what we're going to do is, I like to do find record. We have to choose the base, which is this one, this table. Okay, so the search by field, what we're going to do for that is we're going to search by the email. And the value is going to be the email that we grabbed in the loop. So I'm going to choose email L. Murray. Search for exact match. Yes. All right. So now this is the key here is at the bottom. It says create Airtable record if it doesn't exist yet. That's what we want to do. So I'm going to check that. And then it gives us the fields to populate. So I'm going to go once again to email. First name, this is where we get to grab the values that we extracted in those formatter steps. So I'm going to choose first name and then last name right there. Okay, I think we have what we need, so I'm going to go ahead and test that. And if I look at Airtable, it should get, there we go, Lorraine Murray, email and first name, last name broken out into two. Okay, so that works. So let's go ahead and publish this and we'll test it for real. So I'm going to go into the webhook. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it into a new tab, and that should kick off the Zap. And we should see all the values populate our Airtable here. And there we go. All right, that's how you take information from something like a spreadsheet and not only loop through the rows to add it to another platform, but along the way you can use some formatting steps in Zapier to do things like take a name and break it into first and last name. So I hope you found that valuable, and it's come in handy for me. And stay tuned for more tips and tricks on Zapier, as well as I have a Zapier Fundamentals course coming out, and you can find a link for that in the description if you're interested. Thanks for tuning in.